Good day, everyone, and welcome to our session and webinar today on for Affinity Risk Solutions on how to tie together and boost your third-party risk management processes. So the agenda for today is we're going to start off with Lee Bristow, who's the Affinity Risk Solutions CTO. Before that, I'll be talking about third-party risk management, so I'll carry on my session. Lee will then take over from a CTO perspective to give us an overview of the Affinity Risk Solutions and a demo of the product itself. Natalie Serrano, our head of channel partners, will then introduce the speakers. We've got Clive from Investec, Cindy from Old Mutual, and Malcolm from Mobius Consulting, who will be giving their insights in terms of third-party risk management. And we'll then have a panel discussion. So please, use this opportunity to pose your questions to the panel. Our first section is on third-party risk management itself and the state of third-party risk management. We've done quite a bit of research for this webinar, trawled through the internet, trawled through various organizations' reports on third-party risk management, as well as overlaid that with our own experiences from a Mobius Consulting perspective. So I'm just going to kick it off with our first poll, though, which will be telling and keep the session interactive. Please use the voting buttons to answer the question: do you know how many third parties your organization currently uses? All right, the poll results: there are 76% of the attendees, the organizations, do not know how many third parties their organization currently uses, and only 24% are confident that they do. This very much correlates with our experiences in the market. I think it's actually one of the big obstacles in getting going with third-party risk management is that people are unsure of the actual scale of the problem in itself. So sometimes that leads to kind of a stall right at the beginning. But it's in the projects that we've helped organizations with, the first step is actually to trawl through the financial systems, trawl through the IT databases, etc., and actually find out who those third parties are, because typically there's no central register of who those companies are. The scale of the issue at hand in terms of third-party risk management is massive. If one looks at the Fortune 500 companies, they're using typically in excess of 20,000 vendors, which is a massive number to get your head around, let alone the risks that those might pose. If a little bit more locally in South Africa, from a JSE top 40, our experience has been that those are typically over 10,000 vendors being used by each of those organizations. Just a step back in terms of third parties, and we can use the third parties, vendors. There's a number of different terms for the topic, but there's good business reasons for using third parties. Improved profitability, especially now when eyes are on the bottom line. Sometimes third parties can provide the service for a cheaper price than we can do it in-house. A faster time to market. They've got established processes and established systems that you don't need to spin up in your organization. You can just turn it on, leading to competitive advantage and decreased costs. So there's good business reasons for using third parties, which means that business is going to use them more. So this is something that's we as risk professionals need to get our heads around and help the organizations that we serve to manage these risks. If we look at the complexity, I think it's a relatively new science, third-party risk management, and when I say relatively, I mean, so from a Mobius Consulting perspective, we've been in it for about 4 years. Affinity since 2017. Lee will introduce that. But as we start exploring the topic more, we can understand the scale of the issue and the scale of, let's call it, the problem. From a technology perspective, the increase in use of cloud has definitely increased the complexity of the third party and the number of third party relationships. From a sourcing perspective, the use of brokers and insurance companies and other sorts of companies that utilize brokers, The concept of fourth parties, who do your third parties use to provide the service to you? And is there some visibility? Because obviously a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Around marketing side of things, often, unfortunately, we see things going wrong from a privacy perspective at the marketing agency level. So, you know, the use of third parties is not going to go away. It's only going to get more prevalent. So I think, you know, the sooner we start understanding the complexity and start getting our heads around third-party risk management in our organizations, you know, the better. So our research has led us to understand that 43% of organizations do not perform due diligence checks on their third parties. I think that's getting better, but still a very scary thought to consider that the third parties that may be on your books, maybe only 43% of them have had a look at from a risk management and due diligence perspective. And then who's to say how old those due diligences are and whether those risks are still the same, whether the services provided by that third party is still the same, what the risk profile is still the same. So, you know, really, I don't think anyone would say that that's a reassuring number. Often different departments might have, you know, better risk profiles than this. We work with a number of organizations that are adopting cloud quite strongly, and typically those cloud service providers go through a pretty rigorous check. So I'd say those numbers are pretty much higher, but across the board, our research has led us to understand 43% is what we've kind of understood from a due diligence perspective. All right, I'm going to head into poll number 2. We've touched on some of the risks, and we'll go into it in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But in your opinion, do you think that your organization is covering all the risks from a third-party risk management perspective? All right, poll results there, not surprising. 88% of you said that you do not believe that all your third-party risks are being covered. I suppose if 88% of you did believe it was being covered, you would have found something else to do on your Thursday afternoon. So I think the number of people on the webinar today bears testament to the fact that this is something that we don't feel we've got our heads around and hands around. So what are some of those potential risks? Remember, as we increase the use of third parties, we're increasing the risk to the organization. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. From a technology perspective, far greater use of cloud and cloud adoption for various business reasons, but you know, that data is sitting somewhere outside of our organization. Do we understand where it is? Do we understand what controls in place? So technology changes leading to increased risk. The regulators are really starting to get their head around third-party risks. You know, in the banking industry and insurance industries. Really starting to stipulate how member organizations should be managing their third-party risk. From a broader legislation perspective, in South Africa we've got PPIA, in Europe we've got GDPR, which also has you know, guidelines in terms of third-party risk management and how the risk continues within you as an organization, even though the processing might be happening outside of your organization. It's still your responsibility to manage that risk. If one is, from a breach perspective, if one has to look at any of the breach reports, I would hazard to say that in excess of 50% of those breaches are as a result of a third party that was breached, that then led to the actual organization that unfortunately made it onto the headlines, you know, losing data. So from a breach perspective, that's increasing the visibility of the risk. And then you know, we're working with a lot of organizations, large organizations, enterprises that are running third-party risk management projects for themselves. So that has a knock-on effect in the market, whereby an organization gets assessed from a third-party risk management perspective and starts thinking about their own third parties and what they need to be doing in order to manage their own risks. So we get the concept of fourth parties or nth parties, as one of our other clients is calling it. How low does it, how long is that chain of service providers. One of the banks I spoke to recently tracked that down to 9 levels of service providers. So they were engaging with one level, but there were 9 different levels below that. And I think we'll uncover the ultimate risks in time, but for now, I think a lot of organizations, just for sanity's sake, are focusing on their immediate third parties. So this is an interesting slide that, based on our research, talks to what is the sort of coverage that we feel we're getting across each of those areas of third party usage. But we can see all the numbers are relatively low. I'd say probably on average about 50% coverage or 50% assurance that we've got the risks covered. And bear in mind that these are for the third parties that we know about. So, we started with a big unknown as to which third parties are we actually using. And then even within those third parties, are we sure that we've got those risks covered? And unfortunately, the answer is about kind of 50-50 at this stage. So, still quite a lot of work to be done. And really the rest of the session hopes to kind of fill in some of those gaps in terms of our knowledge and what we should do from a next steps perspective. So one of the big questions is where does third-party risk management sit, and who should own third-party risk management? So I'm going to launch into poll number 3 to ask you, the audience, is your third-party risk management centralized or decentralized? Okay, so not that strong a kind of a bias this time. 60% saying decentralized and 40% saying centralized. In the majority of clients we're working with, there seems to be a bit of a decentralized orientation towards third-party risk management. And I don't think that's by design necessarily, that's just by a result of how third-party risk management is growing up. We see third-party risk management being adopted from an IT perspective due to the nature of what they're doing from a cloud, adopting new cloud vendors, et cetera, So there's IT is kind of pushing with third-party risk management. Procurement, obviously, as the primary contractor, typically for a lot of organizations, has their third-party risk management process. And then other parts of the business will have similar but different third-party risk management processes. So, unfortunately, what we're saying is decentralized, but not by design. Decentralized because just due to how third-party risk management is growing up. I've no doubt that the centralization will start coming. If one looks at the risks that I mentioned earlier, from an organizational perspective, you can start getting your head around all of those regulatory or data processing risks or reputational risks and start pulling them into a single function. It will be far more efficient from an organizational perspective. So 77% of organizations that were polled in one survey did say that third-party risk management was really a strategic priority. So that shows the intent from an organizational perspective. I think unfortunately from a maturity perspective, there's still some work to be done. So I think that's why we've got so many people on the call and so much interest in this topic is there's an onus on us as risk professionals to start getting this ball rolling and improve that request from the strategic perspective to get this in place. At this stage, third-party risk management really needs to sit with the C-suite and the board. That's as a result of the immaturity, I would say, of the science within organizations. So, we need someone senior with broad visibility that can kind of pull all the pieces together, because there's no one central area within the business that owns third-party risk management. And then also just from a kind of a show of support for the nature of third-party risk management. Ultimately, I think it will sit in some sort of risk function, but for now, we still see a decentralized approach. So my last slide talks to how organizations are going about understanding the third parties and processing on the third-party risk management side of things. Unfortunately, the majority, 66% based on our research, still use manual processes and spreadsheets. It's really one of the more monotonous things to actually be running manually. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Mavis Consulting was running some of these processes for our clients manually. It's resource intensive, very costly, and the people involved in the process spend most of their time collecting data, not analyzing the data. So, we really believe that there's got to be a better way, and fortunately for us, I think there is a better way. I'm going to hand over to Lee Bristow, the Finity Chief Technology Officer, to give you an introduction to Finity Risk Solutions and its triplicity model.
Thank you very much, Pat. Appreciate that. So just as an introduction to Finity Risk Solutions, Finity has been operating since 2017. We established the organization in South Africa, and we are no strangers to economic challenges and the likes from being an organization that has grown up in Africa and is representing companies across the African continent and into Europe. In terms of our data, we have aligned our security with AWS, and our infrastructure is hosted out of Europe, specifically in Ireland and the UK. Our customers include the likes of Investec Bank, Santam, Old Mutual, from a retail perspective, Woolworths, including manufacturing being Growth Point. In terms of the actual Finity platform, the platform consists of 5 modules. Each module, of course, can be procured individually. We're going to be focusing primarily on the third-party risk management modules, which is made up of triplicity and resilience. The actual platform is sort of divided into sort of 3 core areas, which is risk identification, which is typically taken care of at an enterprise level, your risk assessments, with your remediation and treatment being your catch-all in terms of managing any aspects relating to risk and the treatment thereof. The whole concept around Finity is to be able to capture as much data as humanly possible so that we can create really interesting reports that can be used for decision support. In terms of the philosophy of Finity, we have combined agile and risk management into a single platform. And the idea behind creating risk agility is through the use of workflows and automation. And that is typically achieved by firstly identifying your risks, knowing what they are, and in our case, it is relating to your third parties. So that is typically the parties that are involved with those third parties, and of course having a central repository of all kinds of third parties. We're not just talking about IT vendors. From an insurance perspective, we've got brokers, binder holders, intermediaries. In IT, you typically have joint ventures and third and fourth parties being able to support one another. All of that needs to be pulled together into that identification phase. From there, you've got to be able to profile. And the concept around the agility around profiling is to be able to stratify those third parties into high, medium, and low, and then automatically kicking off the controls assessment that that fits that particular third party. And then, of course, all of that information is aggregated into central reporting, and then ultimately providing resilience into the business through effective decision support. Now, the workflow around risk management is typically broken up into 5 buckets. So the first bucket is the stakeholders, and we're going to just capture that from a third-party registry perspective as well as the questionnaire. So as we're going through the demo, we're going to start with the registry, and then we're going to go into a little bit of design around our questionnaires. From there, it's the assessment. So we need to stratify those third parties into high, medium, and low, as well as which controls assessment are the most appropriate for them, and how do we workflow that from an automated perspective. From there, we'll have a look at our reporting, drilling down into potential improvements and remediation process that again will help leaders make the right decisions relating to their third parties. So from here, I'm going to be jumping into the demonstration, and I'm going to be taking over the screen for a second. This is the actual platform that you will see from Affinity perspective. As you can see, we have continuous updates across the platform, and the two modules that we're going to be focusing in on are triplicity and resilience. So from a triplicity perspective, when you log into the platform, you are presented with a easy to use navigation system to be able to identify, your third parties, your assessments, your reporting, as well as your configuration. So as mentioned, what we would want to do is bring together all of those third parties into a central repository, which is your registry. This registry brings together the parties that would be involved in terms of helping assess that particular third party. Now, as part of the actual assessment process, we would want to design questionnaires, and the Affinity platform allows for questionnaires to be designed as well as uploaded and managed. One of the really great features about the Affinity platform is that we can create rules based on specific questionnaires. So as a questionnaire is responded to by a third party or by an internal relationship manager, there are specific recommendations, workflows, and even registry updates that are automatically fired off utilizing this really intuitive configuration and rule engine and recommendation engine. From there, we would be able to run multiple assessments, and these would be your sort of run as campaigns or mini projects. These campaigns can be seen across the platform. So as an example, we have a 27001 controls assessment for leading bank. Within this particular assessment, we would be able to track from start to finish the actual assessment, how far they are in the assessment. As you can see, 31% in terms of completion rates, the numbers that have been completed, and the inherent risk rating associated to that. From a third-party perspective, the only thing that they typically would be seeing is this actual assessment. So as an example, if the third party is capable of working email as well as clicking on using a browser, they will very quickly be able to understand what is required, and if they have any questions relating to that particular assessment, there is information that can be managed through the help feature within that particular questionnaire. So this assessment is being tracked in real time, as you saw. Firstly, the user has a visualization of how far they are in their assessment. And of course, we have different types of configurations around the assessment. Once this has been completed and the user has declared that all the information and evidence that has been provided is clear, a review process of that third party then kicks off. And you saw how we were able to design that particular review process. And as you can see over here, this is just an example of a recommendation. So it is recommended based on the scoring, the weighting, the way in which that particular questionnaire has been answered. It is actually recommended that this third party services be terminated because they pose basically pose too high a risk to the organization. If you get to a point where you want to remove them, or you can accept and close this particular assessment, or you can basically escalate for removal through a particular process. Then you would get to reporting. So we have a number of reports, including individual, select, dashboard, and RAG. I've selected a few of the reports for us, which includes our dashboard report. So this gives a very high level view of the number of managed third parties, the number of moderate risks related to that 27001 assessment that we had just kicked off. And it also allows you to drill down into specific third parties. This is for IT company 6. And we can actually drill all the way down from that heat map into the detail relating to that particular third party, and if there was any evidence associated to it. And then finally, from a RAG report perspective, this is a RAG report for the 27001 controls assessment for leading bank. This is a really great report because it brings out and really visualizes where you've got potentially high risks that you are facing within your organization. So as an example, we've got IT company 8, and we can see here relating to employee screening. Well, firstly, overall, from a summary perspective, we are quite woefully unprepared for that and definitely not in compliance, but for specifically IT company 8, they've also got some challenges. So from a treatment perspective, we would want to track that in a treatment log. Inside that treatment log, is what I have loaded here, which is IT Company 8, employee screening. And of course, I've assigned it to the external person at the third party and highlighted that we would want this completed by a certain point, and we can track the progress and remediation all the way to the very end. And that brings me to the end of my demonstration. Now, I know that was a very light, high-level demonstration of the Silenci platform, and of course, there is a lot more to it and a lot more modules. So if you would like at any stage to have a more detailed view, please do get in touch with us. And also, if there are any questions, please do post them in the chat.
Thank you very much, Lee. That was very interesting. And yes, even if you have questions for Lee and not just for the panel, feel free to post them to us. Posting a little reminder, please use the Q&A box for any questions you have. You still have the chat function for technical problems. For our panel questions as well, of course, you can send them anonymously if you wish to. And please mention if your question is for one specific panel member. Panel, I think Pat already mentioned it. We have Clive from Investec, Cindy from Old Mutual, and Malcolm from Mobius, and they will introduce themselves by giving you a little overview of their own TPRM challenges and their solution. Clive, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I hope you are safe and well wherever you are in the world. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this in person, but I would love to chat with you one day in person around third-party risk management. So my name is Clive Novus. I'm the IT risk officer at Investec. I look across the group, so I cover all the business units and all the jurisdictions. I guess going back a few years, our challenge regarding third-party risk management was that, as I mentioned, Investec is a global organization, and we have different compliance needs across the globe, everything from the United States all the way through to Australia. We also had a very manual process of assessing our third-party risk management. So as Patrick alluded to earlier, lots of time spent emailing spreadsheets and PDFs between us and vendors, and spending most of our time chasing information rather than actually managing the risk. There was also quite a lot of duplication in the system, because you had a vendor which serviced multiple jurisdictions, and those multiple jurisdictions were each doing a risk assessment on the vendor. So quite a lot of challenges going back a few years. The solution really was to automate, so that we could make use of technology to facilitate the workflow, to integrate the answers that are coming back from our vendors into our risk management processes. So we really needed a solution which would, assist in managing the process, so that we could actually focus on managing the risk of the third parties. And that's where we partnered, with Mobius and the Silenci guys. So that's my story. I'm going to hand over to Cindy now.
Thank you, Clive.
Thanks, Clive. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Cindy Kwanazi. People call me Cindy. I am an information security risk officer for Old Mutual, currently reporting into the CISO structure. I have been in the IT industry for almost 8 years now, so 8 years in December, and I specialize in most things related to information security risk assessment. I focus mostly on third-party risk management and application controls review. Okay, just like everyone, also trying to manage our third parties. And part of our journey, for me, the biggest challenge has been just to get a basic risk view of our third-party landscape. So looking at a big organization like Old Mutual and trying to assess, all the third parties. When we did our discovery work, we came up with a lot of legacy third parties. That's like large numbers, up to like 2,000. So to try and do that manually was a challenge, and to also just try to centrally manage our third parties across OML, because similar to Clive, just like not only looking at it from an AMSA perspective, but looking at the rest of Africa, including countries such as Zimbabwe, Malawi, and etc. And I mean, where we did manage to do our assessment or initiate our assessments manually, it was painful to try and keep track of progress in terms of where the campaigns are. It was painful to just even report on it, because now you're trying to pull from all the spreadsheets to just report in terms of where you are. And like with all like process maturity, for us, automation was the next steps to mature our process. So we had the process better down, and then the next step was to automate. And part of that journey was to work with triplicity, just so first of all, to just try and get the central view of all our third parties to enable us to better manage our third parties. So that's having that one central point. And a key thing, of course, in automation comes with version control. And also just to be able to track progress on our campaigns, so we can see which of our third parties haven't even started, conducting the assessment, or where they are, because then that allowed us to incorporate automation around follow-ups. So all that became easy. And the biggest win, of course, was to just get that risk view of our third parties, because the tool allowed us to almost, I'm going to say like churn a lot, like initiate a lot of assessment in a batch format. So due to the legacy and discovering a whole lot of third parties, and that's the known. So we're not saying we know all the third parties within Ovinto. So the ones that we know, we're able to at least get a risk view of them from an inherent risk perspective. So that's the profiling, because then that allowed us to know which third parties to be concerned about, how to prioritize, high risk third parties. So that for me is a big win. And the next steps, I guess, would be, so we've been doing the assessment, we're starting to get our processes starting to mature. And for me, the next step was to mature the capability around the assurance, not just in where a control is implemented, but where control is implemented effectively. And also when exactly, to run these campaigns, because there's also the relationship element from a third party that's missing, because third parties change their architecture, and by doing that, they change their risk, inherent risk rating. So how do we then engage there just to ensure that, everything is still working accordingly? So yeah, so in summary, that is me. I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cindy. That was a really nice overview, and also your next plans. Last but not least, Malcolm, I would like to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you, Cindy. So good afternoon, everyone, and great to be with you. Thanks for the invite to participate in the panel. My name is Malcolm Parker. Just checking you can see my video okay. My name is Malcolm Parker, and I'm a senior manager consultant in the Mobius Cape Town office. I'm responsible for leading the Cape Town consulting team and also the TPRM service line. I have about 17 years of experience in risk management. I started my career as an auditor and accountant in a Big Four firm, but began to focus on IT risk management after a couple of years. I spent the bulk of my career in the consulting arena, including 9 years with 2 of the different Big Four firms. I've been in privacy compliance lead at a Fortune 500 firm in California, and also had the role as an IT audit head at a major retailer. So I think I've got a pretty good understanding of risk management, both from an internal perspective from an organization and also from a consultant view. So the main challenges that I see my clients facing are first of all, grasping the extent of the potential impact of unmanaged third-party risk for those that haven't begun this journey. And then secondly, for those that are further down the line, is dealing with the enormity of the challenge due to the large volumes of vendors and often small internal risk management teams that are trying to get through those volumes. So the solutions for us have been helping clients to relatively quickly identify and then risk profile all of their third parties using triplicity to get that overall view of, well, where is my risk sitting, so that I can begin to really focus on the key risks. Similar to what Cindy said, your risk often sits with a small number of vendors, and if you can just get past the volumes and focus on the risk, that really is of great value. And then once you've got that, you can then direct your resources to those right resources. right risks and manage those vendors and drill down into that and not get bogged down in spreadsheets and emails. And the volume, when you're trying to do it on email, when you're trying to do it on a spreadsheet, is actually quite overwhelming. So that's a little bit about me, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Malcolm. So yes, we are now open to answer all your questions. Malcolm, Cindy, Clive, thanks for taking the time for us. I would like to kick off with a very simple starter question. What was that one reason that ultimately made you go, okay, this manual isn't working anymore. We need to go automated. We need to have software help with this. Clive, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I referred to some of those reasons previously in my intro. I think the one is duplication. So we had different areas reviewing the same vendor multiple times across the investor group. So automation allows us to have a single view of the vendors and a single view of the risk that that vendor poses to Investec. That was the one reason. The other reason is just sheer volume. You can either chuck a whole bunch of people at this chasing information, or you can automate it to get efficiencies and to make it easier for us internally to assess the risk, but also from our vendors' perspective. Instead of having vendors fill in Excel spreadsheets and PDFs and submit things, via email, it's all in one place. It's one system. It's really just easy to, answer the questions, submit the evidence, and then they, just from a pure efficiency perspective. So those are our two main drivers.
Thank you. It doesn't only make your life easier, it also makes the life of your vendors easier, which is never a bad thing. Cindy.
I think for me, just echoing what Clive was saying, it's more the numbers. So we had, our process only came into play, I think, around 2016, and we all know how long Mutual has been in existence. So to manage the large numbers that come with legacy, there was absolutely no way to be effective and efficient doing it manually. I think we did attempt where, we ran projects trying to do small batches, but, you focusing on like your inherently low risk third parties, and at your backlog, you're sitting with a very high. So the profile for me, like I said, it was quite important that we try to take all those legacy third parties and just put them through the system, and then just know who to focus on.
Thank you. So getting an overall grip on things.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. Bernhard submitted a question. What are your views on alignment of risk appetite? In other words, you and a third party might identify and agree a risk and mitigating controls, but the third party may have a higher or changing risk appetite than the procuring assessor. Who would like to take that question? Malcolm.
So that's really an interesting question, because obviously when doing third-party risk management, it is the company who's doing the assessment's risk appetite that often drives these assessments. And if your vendors do not align with your risk appetite, that really often is a risk to your organization. So these assessments help to get that alignment right. And if the alignment is way out, then probably the two parties aren't going to work well together. And that may be the end of that relationship.
Cindy.
Yeah, I think also for me, I haven't really dealt with a case like that, but I think, in what we ask or how our frameworks work within security, it's minimum. So to have a third party that is not coming to play with that, then like Malcolm was saying, in terms of then the working relationship is just not there. And that's especially, I think that case for me would be more where it's more the production third parties, so the existing ones, if I can say that, because they're already in the building. So it gets difficult to meet halfway with them, whereas when it comes to onboarding, it's easier to then, try to negotiate, because then you have the upper hand as they're trying to get business. So, yeah.
Communication is key. Thank you very much. Clive, I have a future question for you.
Okay.
You could predict the future and the future of third-party risk management in 3 to 5 years. Where do you think we are heading?
I think if you have a look at where technology is heading, you're going to see more and more SaaS in the world, and you're going to see more and more cloud, being the big cloud vendors. So, you know, AWS and Azure and, you know, Google Cloud. And I think we're heading down that road. We're going to we need to get our heads around how we're going to do risk assessments of the major cloud vendors. I mean, if you have a look at, you know, Microsoft's market cap, it's $1 trillion. It's bigger than the whole FTSE 100 put together. So to have, you know, a company like Investec or any other organization trying to do risk assessments on Microsoft, is that like even possible? Or how do you do that? How do you get your heads around that and the risk that Microsoft poses to your business, assuming that all your emails in Office 365, whatever it is. So we've got to get our heads around the big cloud vendors and how we do risk assessments on them. And I think, you know, the regulators are taking a big lead in that. But also, I see technology making use of more and more SaaS day to day and moving away from these big legacy applications. So, for example, how do you do a third-party risk assessment on Dropbox or Salesforce or Zoom or WebEx or, you know, DocuSign or SurveyMonkey or any of these sort of big, you know, SaaS providers? They are also third parties. You know, technically they've got your information, they're processing your information, you're touching the infrastructure, users logging in. How do you get your head around that? So I think that's where we're heading if you just see where the world of technology is going. So, you know, we need to get our heads around, you know, SaaS and cloud.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good summary. I just don't want SurveyMonkey to do this. Let's keep it with Finity. Cindy, would you like to look into the future as well?
I think what Clive said for me is that's I mean, it's something that we're already trying to handle, because I look at when it comes to third party, especially with the SaaS solution, it decentralizes access management. That's a one key thing for me that's becoming quite a key issue. So it's now having to wrap our heads around how do we manage that risk. And it's also something I was thinking, like, where I feel, you know, a lot of what we are trying to assess from a due diligence perspective is very much focused on governance, but not the control effectiveness part of things. So I think, you know, the technical bit of how we manage our third parties or how we engage with our third party is becoming quite key, because now everyone can almost tick the boxes when it comes to governance. That is right. But when it comes to the technical bit, it's still a challenge. So that's where I think we need to just get stronger.
Thank you. Jacob submitted a question. What are the latest trends when it comes to the idea of shared supplier assessments to bring down time spent on the client and supplier side, answering often very similar questionnaires? Malcolm, I can see you already smiling. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that actually was going to be my answer for the trend and the crystal ball. I think, you know, as a consulting firm, we're often doing assessments on behalf of different companies. So we sometimes finding ourselves assessing the same vendor from different clients' perspective. So we also get to see the vendor fatigue with dealing with all these assessments. And I think the logical answer to that is these shared assessments, or maybe a pre-assessment that you're willing to share. And there are a couple of organizations that are doing this, but it's kind of new, but I think that's where things are going in the future.
Thank you. Clive, Cindy, would you like to comment on that? Or did Malcolm already cover everything?
Yeah,
Sorry, Clive.
No, you go ahead, Cindy.
No, I agree with Malcolm. It's something it's a concept I was actually also thinking about. Like, we have the whole KYC concept, know your customer. I think we're going to need a KYT or something, know your third party. Because, you know, as much as you're concerned about your customers, a third party is becoming a real one. And I think Pat spoke around the stats about where most breaches are with our third parties. And it's something that we are also starting to experience, whereby, this third party got compromised. What did they do for us? What information did they have for us? So it's becoming a very concerning area, and it's not just from an infosec perspective, but also looking at the risk that third party brings about. So know your third party, for me, should be something to start thinking about.
Thank you. Clive.
Hi.
Anything left?
No, I think we've looked at these sort of industry third party of a particular vendor. I think that the caution over there is to make sure that what's covered is actually the services that you use. So if you go back to my Microsoft example, you want to make sure that whatever you use for Microsoft is covered in that industry agreement. I'm sure it will be with a vendor like Microsoft, but there may be other vendors who do certain types of processing for you that may or may not be within inside that third-party risk management or within inside their ISO certification or whatever. So I think by all means look at them, but make sure that the services that you use that vendor for are specifically covered.
Very good point. I have two more questions. One is, when you switched from the manual processes to actually automating everything, what was the one thing that surprised you, right? You have a list of benefits in your head that you expect when you make a move. But was there something where you thought, I didn't see that one coming, but I definitely take it? Clive, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I would say the number of stakeholders who are interested, they sort of come out the woodworks. So, you think it's just you and your team or your function, but then you have people from procurement, wanting to see the lists and assessments, and people from, finance to make sure that, they're still, authorized vendors, the financial crime people get involved, the compliance people, the legal people, data protection officers. So I think just the number of interested parties within your own organization that are suddenly interested in third-party risk management. As Patrick put up that slide earlier on in terms of where the risk is. The risk is sitting all over the show, and the Silenci solution was able to give all of those stakeholders a view as to who the third parties are and what risk they pose to investors. So I think that was more the surprising thing, is how many internal stakeholders were suddenly taking an interest.
So would you say that makes it automatically also a tool that helps you getting that leadership buy-in, because they suddenly have the transparency into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think transparency and visibility are key. So, if it's sitting on a spreadsheet in someone's email inbox, you're not going to have that visibility. But suddenly, if it's in a enterprise system, and the reports are available to everyone to consume, then it certainly enables that.
Malcolm, is your experience similar, or have you a different wow moment?
Yeah, actually, to build on what Clive was saying, I think that the ability to collaborate. So, I mean, Clive giving the perspective that a number of stakeholders that want to be on there, but I think that the fact that the solution allows you to collaborate easily, and that the licensing isn't based on number of seats. So there's no obstacle to collaboration. If from a lines of defense perspective, audit would like to review the assessments, you can make them a reviewer of those assessments. So that ability to collaborate, particularly across the lines of defense, I think is great.
Thank you. Cindy, how's your experience?
I'm just thinking about what Clive was saying as to whether it's good or bad that you become the central point for people requiring the list. Because that's the one thing that has come out, where you now become the go-to person. So we actually had to rename our list from not just third-party register, but third-party risk register, just so we are clear that we're focusing on from a risk perspective, information security. And I think also another one that was good, like I said, a lot of third parties experiencing breaches, was to have a go-to place where you can quickly just go and put in a third-party name and see what the inherent risk is. So you're able to provide that information straight up front, other than just going through all spreadsheet, trying to find which business unit, do they have access to Crown Jewel. So when it comes to third-party incident response, that's something I didn't foresee, like, didn't even think about. Where now you're part of that, responding and providing the necessary information.
That's great. From a time perspective, it leaves us really to just one more question to all of you. And that would be, if you had one tip you would give someone that is just starting out in their TPRM journey, what would that one tip be? Malcolm, let's start with you.
So for an organization that hasn't got anything and maybe is fairly immature, I think the solution is a great opportunity almost to leapfrog some of those maturity levels. Put in place the solutions and build your defined processes and procedures around there. There is a natural flow to where TPRM works in triplicity. So if you follow that flow, the process of assessing inherent risk and then going on to assessing that and build that into your policies and procedures, it basically allows you to go from 0 to 5 pretty quickly.
Thank you. Cindy, what's your number one tip?
For me, it's getting your contracts and sourcing on board. I think this is a step that we did after, we matured the process. And the one input to the assessment is making sure, you have the third parties and who their relationship managers are. But there's so many decentralization in terms of how we onboard our third parties. So to have that view in terms of how we onboard our third parties and getting our contracts and sourcing on board right up front, for me, is my key starting point.
So that means also aligning the processes to have one way of onboarding third parties.
Yes, because I'm only as effective as per the onboarding process is.
Thank you. You're right. That's the earliest one. It doesn't always feel like that's the risk management part, but
yes,
it's definitely part of there. The earlier you start, the quicker you are through that risk profiling, right? Clive, we rounded off with you. Your number one tip.
I think, with third-party risk management, just like with any, key initiative, which is going to cut across an organization, make sure you've got senior management stakeholders, make sure you've got the right funding, make sure you've got the right support, make sure you've got some air cover, because you're going to be going into different business units, you're going to be going into different jurisdictions, you're going to want to see the third-party lists, you want to be able to perform third-party risk management on their behalf, particularly if you're moving towards a centralized model. I mean, even if you're doing a decentralized model, you want to make sure that your methodologies are consistent so you can rely on each other's risk assessments. So I would say that, enterprise project 101, make sure you got the right funding, make sure you got the right executive support, because you're going to need it.
Perfect. So have a plan and have the right stakeholders and the budget approved beforehand, so that you don't suddenly sit there and say, I'm hungry. Perfect. Cindy, Malcolm, Clive, it was such a pleasure having you here. I wish we had another hour. We will follow up with you. There are a few more questions so that we can answer them offline and send out emails. And other than that, it was a pleasure. I'll let you go back to managing your risks now. To our audience, it was a pleasure having you in our webinar. If you want to have more details and want to see more about the system and how we can help you automate your processes, feel free to reach out to us directly, and we are more than happy to help.